Are you recording there?
We're getting B-roll
Awesome.
currently?
Yeah.
Or not B-roll, what do they call
Yeah,
it?
just trying to get like, I don't know. We only have one camera right there, so we're using our phone to get a little more like some dynamic shots going. You know
Beautiful.
What I mean? But yeah, man. Inaugural guest on Riders Alliance QuickTrips. Today
I'm
we have
so honored.
the one, the only New York City's Comptroller Brad Lander.
Hey, thank you for having me here.
And we'll edit in
Nice is
applause.
this? You got a
and
great
stuff
studio.
Like that. Yeah, no, wonderful, beautiful Park Slope. Yeah, no, we're out here. So yeah, I guess we can get into the questions right quick, man. So, A, you are New York City's comptroller, which, to my understanding, is like you're basically the city's accountant. I guess what are the main responsibilities of New York City's comptroller as it pertains to like transit, but also just like in general? What are your responsibilities?
Yeah, so the controller is both the city's chief financial officer, you like follow the money, but also chief accountability officer. Are we getting for those dollars what we need? Are the systems that are essential to serve us, our schools, our parks, our transit, doing what we need?
Okay, so you're essentially like auditing public services to make sure like they're actually
That's right.
running efficiently, running effectively.
We got a team of 700 people who register contracts and settle claims, but the biggest of those teams, 125 people, audit every city agency and the places where our money goes to say, how could we be doing it better? We just put out a big audit on the ferry system that found that the EDC, which runs the ferries, was not being fully transparent about how much money it was costing to run the ferries, $224 million that they weren't reporting over 5 years. We made some recommendations like dynamic pricing, so more for longer rides, but more affordable for low-income people. And I'm pleased to say that just a week after we issued that audit, they accepted a lot of our recommendations. So yeah, the audits, often they shine a spotlight on something that's broken in the city, something that's not working the way it's supposed to be. Maybe we get a tip, our auditors go in there. We do an audit, it takes as much as a year, come out with findings and recommendations, but we don't have any enforcement power.
That's what I was gonna get at. They may take the recommendations, but like your agency, the comptroller's office, isn't really like out here enforcing or handling out like fact finding, giving the report with the facts there, and then.
But look, that's so critical in a democracy. Like the tools you have for making government work better are often like the people demanding it. And it's not possible for the people to demand it if they don't really know what's going on. Public transit's just a great example of that, right? People know what they want, which is regular, high-quality service. But they don't know if what's behind the trains running late is a broken signal or a sick passenger. So if you dig in and look at the data and say, here's what it tells us, that can often be a really powerful tool.
So New York City has like the most expensive transit system in the country. So in order to fund that, we kind of need like reliable revenue streams to be coming in year after year. So as of right now, the MTA, they get like about 40 to 50% of their yearly operating revenue each year from like collecting fares, right? That's right. And when you're in a situation like that, if you say don't have the ridership to be able to support that through fares, you end up in a situation where it's kind of difficult to, properly fund transit year after year. So I guess my question is, what is your overall take on the MTA's current revenue structure where it's relying so heavily on fares? And do you think there are any better ways that we'd be funding transit service?
Definitely. First, let's be clear, MTA, mass transit in New York City, is the lifeblood of the economy and of the region. So it's not, you're right, it's expensive to run this system, but it's what drives the city's economy. It's why, people want to live here because they love the culture, the energy, the diversity. We could only have those things because we have a robust and thriving mass transit system. So it's not just that it's good for riders to have well-funded, affordable mass transit. It's essential for the city's economy. And we're at a moment with some very real shifts right now. The pandemic has shifted so that whereas before, overwhelmingly what people were doing was commuting from the outer boroughs into Midtown, we're starting to see a lot of shifts in that. We're still only at about 40% office occupancy in Manhattan, but there's a lot more going on in the boroughs where people are working from home. So that means a shift in how we think about some elements of how to invest in mass transit, and it definitely means we need to shift how we think about revenues because we can't rely on the fare box for 40 to 50% of the revenues.
One sec. Yeah, no, we are outside right now, man.
We
sorry,
can't rely on the fare box, on strap hangers, on riders for 40 to 50% of the revenue and have the thriving system we need. It's simply not going to work. I'm thrilled that we're finally moving toward congestion pricing, both to reduce traffic and to bring a new revenue system into the subway. But we're going to have to, in these post-pandemic times, look for some new revenue. The subway system, the buses, the transit system, they're not just a service for our people, which they totally are. They are also a vital investment in the economic thriving of our future, and it makes sense to invest public dollars in something like that. If our mass transit is thriving and the economy thrives, then people are creating businesses, and then we have more revenue, and then the economy is growing. If you go the other direction, if you cut, if you don't put new revenue in, if you rely on the fare box even as ridership drops, and then service gets worse, and then people don't feel as good about it, that's a path to not just the subways or the buses decline, that's a path to the city's decline. What we need is the opposite, a path that invests in high quality service, that makes people excited to ride, want to be here, come to the city, create new businesses, build a thriving and more inclusive economy.
If ridership isn't where it was in 2019, right, and we're still relying on fare box revenue to keep the system running, a lot of times it's going to be people that aren't able to take other options, people that, like, where transit is the most affordable option, they're going to be dealing with additional service cuts or additional fare hikes.
This is so important. You know, one thing that's long been great about the subways is they've been a place where people of all incomes and races and neighborhoods kind of come together and share something in the city. If we let the subways and the buses become something that only low-income people use, you get a kind of lemon public service, and you don't invest in that more inclusive economy. You know, we could go in the other direction. You know, it's long been true that buses have much more low-income people riding them than subways, and therefore they've been this sort of stepchild that doesn't get the investment and the resources. What if we have a first-class bus system that's more affordable for everybody who needs it, but also attracts a much more diverse set of New Yorkers? That'd be a lot more likely to generate new riders and new economic activity.
So because of what we were talking about, the fact that the MTA relies so heavily on fares, they have a very deeply vested interest in making sure that every single rider in the system is paying their fare for every single trip. So with recent, somewhat controversial conversations around how the MTA plans to deal with fare evasion, from your perspective, how big of an issue is fare evasion, and do you think that increased enforcement is like the best way that we can go about making sure that transit is funded, which seems like to be the bottom of the issue, the core issue right there, funding transit? Like, is fare enforcement the way to make sure that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus on fare evasion has two fundamental flaws. First, fare revenue is just, for all the reasons we've talked about, not the best way to fund the vast majority of our mass transit system. Now we got helicopters instead of street sweepers.
It'll be fine, I promise you that. You're going to be amazed what we can do with this audio.
Yeah. For the reasons we've discussed, relying on fare box revenue as your primary or a major source of revenue for mass transit, it just doesn't make sense. We need to look at a greater share of public financing of tax revenue in the system if we want a thriving 21st century mass transit. And then on the other hand, if you've got people that can't afford to ride the subways or take the buses, who need to get where they're going, let's look at different options. I was proud as a city council member to be one of the early supporters of Fair Fares, which says for low-income New Yorkers who need to get where they're going every day, they might be going to school, they might be going to work, they might be going to take care of kids, but they can't afford $2.50, of fare both ways every day. We created this option of half-price subway and bus fares. That program has been a great success, but it's too small. So let's expand that program so that people who are, too poor to be able to afford to ride have some option to get where they're going and make their living.
Yeah, so that was actually my next question. I mean, so as of right now, the Fair Fares program, it is great, offers half-price Metro cards to New Yorkers that are living below the federal poverty line, but that's, like you're getting at, a part of the problem. The program's too small right now. I think, right now it's what? For an individual, it needs to be making $13,590. For a family of four, it's $27,750. Like that's beyond destitution in New York City. So I mean, how do you think we could expand programs like fair fares so that more New Yorkers can afford transit service?
I mean, there are so many more New Yorkers who could benefit from this program, and we could expand it in a lot of different ways. We could just say discounted Metro cards or free Metro cards to all New York City public school high school students. Let's do it for every CUNY student. Let's do it for, and that's hundreds of thousands of people in New York City. But we also could just increase the income threshold. I mean, $13,000 a year, that person is so poor. Somebody that's making 17, 18, 20, 22, what a great benefit it would be for them to be able to have essentially, and we're not, I wish we were even talking about free subways or buses. This is still half price. So let's look at expanding that.
So last year, your office, you released the Round the Clock is the New Rush Hour report. And in that report, it basically says that we could drastically improve transit service by providing, 6-minute service all day, every day, like 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. For about $250 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but is relatively cheap compared to how much it would cost to maybe improve other services to a similar degree.
Yep.
But that said, $250 million is $250 million. I guess from your perspective, what is the kind of cost-benefit analysis of providing that kind of all-day, off-peak rapid transit service, just considering that the MTA would need to continue to fund that type of service year after year?
Yeah, look, for all the reasons we've talked about, I think that cuts exactly the kind of investment that makes transit work for people. The difference when you go down into your subway station, and obviously in the pandemic, we have sometimes as long as 15-minute headways in the subways, and certainly for buses. And it just deflates your whole ability to operate, to get where you're going, to be on time to work, to be on time to pick up a kid. What 6-minute headways does is makes it so you can get where you're going on time. And that just can really be transformative in people's lives. I just remember so many trips when my kids had to be picked up from elementary school, and you're running just 3 minutes late, but then you get to the train and then the train is going to be 11 minutes. And now your kid is waiting and, so the difference 6-minute headways would make is huge for people. And yes, $250 million, nothing to sneeze at. But the city's budget is over $100 billion and the state's is even larger. So we could take, I think if the city and the state were to partner on doing something like this, if we looked at using some of the gas tax revenue from upstate, we don't want to put more money into expanding car infrastructure. If we could provide 6-minute headways, many more people could take mass transit instead of driving on a regular basis. Would make a big difference. It's really worth the expense.
Yeah, I agree. I know there's this quote from Human Transit, Jarrett Walker. I don't know if you ever heard it, but it's frequency is freedom. And the idea is, I like that. A lot of the times, especially back in Miami where I was dealing with like 30-minute waits for the bus or something like that, my life would be kind of scheduled around transit service when that's coming. I'm checking my phone, trying to leave 10 minutes before or something like that.
Like that
when
difference between having to make a planned trip and knowing that you could just show up and get where you're going.
Just going to the stop. Different. You don't even check your phone. You know it's coming fast no matter what time you're there. And I believe it's a worth it investment, but I just want to hear from your perspective what that looks like. As the city's chief auditor, you're responsible for making sure that New York's public agencies are running as efficiently and effectively as possible. So in your time as comptrollers, I guess, what are some inefficiencies that you've noted in how we're administering our transit system? Or I guess, if you want to flip the perspective, are there any ways do you think that we could run our transit system more efficiently?
I mentioned this at the beginning. One of the biggest keys to increasing frequency is modernizing the subway signal system. That's something people don't really see every day. Of course, you're not paying attention to it as a rider, so you don't know. We've got basically a century-old signal system, and other systems, London, Paris, have modernized their entire signal system. And basically, the old signal systems worked in segments. And so until one train had left a segment, the next one couldn't come in. And you have this very clunky, safe but slow technology. Modern signal systems, CBTC, they mean you can run your trains more rapidly with using modern signals, and so you can dramatically increase your signal frequency. So that's pretty down in the weeds, pretty wonky. It costs a lot of money. This MTA is doing it. We are slowly modernizing the signals. And the MTA actually just decided to do a really good thing. I do want to give credit to MTA Chair Jano Lieber on this. He decided, given the shifts we were talking about before, rather than put the money they have for signal modernization on the Manhattan lines, to put it on the outer borough lines. I want to give him big credit for that. But boy, what we need is to modernize the signals all throughout the entire subway system. That would make just a huge difference in frequency.
It adds up. It adds up. I mean, even when you have like fast service right now, like more often than not, if you take the subway more than a couple times a week, you're going to get hit with delays that are probably due to this old signal system all the time.
We're sitting right by the F train, which is my line, which during that summer of hell was really one of the lines that was terribly hit. We were demanding more frequent F service, but they basically said to us, we can't run more frequent F service even if we hired more drivers and have more trains, because of the way the signal system works all throughout the very long F line, and it's it travels from Queens through Manhattan over here. And they basically said, given the signal system, they could not run the trains faster than about every 7 or 8 minutes. And of course, once that's the bottom, you really winds up being more like 8 or 9 or 10. Yeah. Now you're just in that place where you're just exhausted and sweaty and mad. Whereas if we modernize the signal system on the F line during peak rush hour, when you've got demand, you could run that every 3 or 4 minutes. It's a huge difference.
You have that reliable service where it's going to be every 3-4 minutes because the signal system can keep up with that demand. Now,
That's right.
It makes perfect sense. So, okay, absolute last thing. Thank you so much for coming out and talking with us. 3 words or less. How do we make transit better in New York? Go.
Well, I'm tempted because of what you taught me today to say frequency is freedom.
Hey, shout out Jared Walker.
But I think what I'll go with is 6-minute headways.
Hey, 6-minute headways. All right, heard. So, one more time, New York City's Comptroller Brad Lander, thank you so much for coming out here, man.
So much fun.
Appreciate
Thank you. This was great.
Woo.